Hi, welcome. It's Sherry Bennett here, and this is Let's Talk Cannabis. We're here on site at the Bayview Golf and Country Club talking about a topic that has quite a lot of stigma attached to it. Thank you. So we were talking this morning, we're going to carry on our discussion with Shalynn Hamilton and Sean Kinsman. Sean, take it away. Where did we leave off?
Okay,
there?
so Sherry, how do you think making cannabis, how do you think cannabis can become more accessible to the patients that need it?
I think that, well, it has a lot to do with government right now, government regulations, and that's something that patients deserve. They deserve safe, affordable, dignified access to their medicine, to cannabis. And I'm going to turn that question over to Shalynn because we have a lot of friends and colleagues in common that have an issue with access.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
Access it's a fairly all-encompassing term, and a lot of patients face access issues in different ways. So affordability, taxation, those are two major issues, as well as the ability to see and interact with a product before purchasing it, being outside the scope of the current mail order system, whether you don't have an address or a credit card to place an order. Those are all barriers to access that a patient might sort of encounter. From my own personal experience, being able to talk to a medical professional about it is another point of access that people take issue. In my sort of experience, my personal experience, when I approached my doctor about it, he was not open about it at all. Shut it down fairly quickly. Luckily, there was some friends, Rob Frid, that we had in common, who recommended other resources I could go to, and a clinic, Hello Cannabis, got me introduced and got me all set up so that I was able to get started. But access it's an issue that everyone faces a little bit differently, but together we're sort of combating them all at once.
Yeah, and there are layers of issues, really. I have elder people in my life and clients that are getting cannabis from their grandchildren, frankly, because the legal system is complex and they haven't perfected it yet, frankly. The seniors deserve safe access to their medicine as well. So I sincerely hope that the government will take that into account right now, because having doctor supervision is crucial, actually. A doctor or a nurse practitioner here in Ontario. I think in Vancouver, naturopathic doctors are able to prescribe it, but here in Ontario, it's medical doctors and nurse practitioners. Mm-hmm. So that's what I try to do. I try to refer people to the medical professionals, whether you take it recreationally or for medicinal purposes, by the way, because I think that your body doesn't know the difference between medicinal and recreational. I believe very strongly that cannabis is medicine. Cannabis is plant medicine, and it could be a treatment option for every single human being on this planet. And yet we were fed all this irrational, non-scientific propaganda in the just past 90 years, actually, that it's been prohibited. So we're all three different generations here. I grew up in a generation where, my parents thought it was the devil weed, and what will the neighbors think, and it's going to lead to other drugs. And I was terrified to take it. My father was a doctor, and in those days people were stealing cough medicine from his office several times, as a matter of fact, to get the whatever it was in cough medicine those days. So I was brought up in a family that we were taught, oh no, cannabis, that's drugs, it's terrible. So I was absolutely terrified. So I didn't actually try cannabis until an adult, until I was in my 50s. So, and I was just so delightfully surprised. And yes, it's not good for everyone, but saying things like we've got to protect the children and we've got to eradicate the black market. What's happening now is that the black market is thriving right now. As I said, we have people getting it from their children, and we have 11 Canadians dying every day of opioids, not cannabis. Cannabis does not kill people. opioids do. And as I said, we do need, for acute pain, if we have a car accident, you need Tylenol 3s and Percocets to go to the dentist if you have a root canal, but short term only. For long-term pain management and chronic pain, cannabis it has to be an option now. It just has to be with this crisis going on.
I'm sure you've heard it from a lot of patients who are taking pain medications as well, that introducing cannabis into that mix has helped maybe lessen the amount of pain medication they can take, or eradicated it altogether.
Right.
For a lot of people, myself included, how do you put it? It lets you get friendly with life again.
It helps people become friendly with life again.
But it helps sort of balance out a lot of things for a lot of patients, where they can, still play with their grandkids, or still focus at work, or sleep through the night.
Right.
And maintain a regular life.
And sorry.
Well, yeah, I agree. I feel like the main issue right now is with cannabis is people still have the stoner vibe to it, is that you're smoking it to get high, but right now people are smoking it for the medicinal benefits. So you can still live a normal life and be on CBD or cannabis and be functioning just fine.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and you said your parents, they take it sublingually as an oil, correct?
Yes.
Consumption methods too are something that you've talked at an extent about, educating people that there are other ways to consume cannabis other than just smoking it, especially for people who maybe grew up where it wasn't okay to talk about that. The more information you can empower people with, from
the better.
How you can take it, where you can get it safely, and who you can trust with the right information, is propelling this movement forward. So thank you for your work.
Thank you too. And we know some wonderful former professional hockey players and football players and athletes in general, and often they suffer from extreme ongoing chronic pain, joint pain, and concussion syndrome, and other symptoms related to being concussed and battered around. And so let's talk about the executive director of your not-for-profit.
Sure. So, I'm hoping he'll be available to come on a future episode. But so Medicinal My Way was born just over a year ago. We started as an advocacy group and then converted at the beginning of this year into a federally registered not-for-profit organization. Our mission is to improve access for patients across Canada. And we have some great ambassadors in our program who are willing to, including Sherry, to talk about their experiences with cannabis from a professional perspective and from a patient perspective. One of those ambassadors is actually our executive director, Rob Fred. He's a former pro hockey player, and as a result of his career, he struggles with chronic pain and other conditions that had him heavily medicated in one way or another, and not able to live his life, I think, to the fullest that it could be. And he's integrated cannabis, I think, successfully into his treatment, and now he leads the way for Medicinal My Way, and advocates for not just athletes, who are great spokespeople for the general population as well, but for every patient.
Right.
Well, to add to that point, recently, actually, the UFC, not NHL, I know actually partnered with Aurora Cannabis because they use CBD as a medicinal benefit for recovery from injuries. So I hope this is the forefront for professional sports to come in and realize that CBD is actually helpful in the recovery, and anything from concussions to inflammation, to being just sore.
Yes.
Yeah, and these guys, like us, spend their lives, or risk their lives, entertaining us, and then now a lot of them are having severe physical difficulty and on assistance or on disability. So it's hard, because the cost of medical cannabis, or the cost of cannabis from a licensed producer from the government, is double, sometimes triple, than what we can get from Betty down the street. And I don't know Betty, but I just use her name, right? Betty down the street. So my hope is that people will become educated. The reason why our endocannabinoid system is not taught in med school, the reason why a lot of doctors just don't know about it yet, is because it was just discovered in the 1990s, I believe, in the early 1990s, 92 or something, by a chemist called Dr. Raphael Mechoulam. And he's actually referred to as the grandfather of cannabis research. Did you know that?
No.
They didn't teach us that in school,
No, they did
right?
not.
They didn't. But he's a fascinating guy, born in Sofia, Bulgaria, and worked as a professor in University of Tel Aviv, I believe, in Jerusalem, in somewhere in Israel. But he's an absolute genius. So he isolated THC in 1963, I think, and then the cannabinoid CBD in 1964. And that led to his discovery of the human endocannabinoid system. So that, in a nutshell, the way I understand it, is that we have this endocannabinoid system that regulates all the other systems in our bodies, like our hormones, our heat, and I have a whole list of it. I can't really name off all the things, but it's the mother of all systems. And cannabis used to be in our food supply years ago. It's only been 90 years or so since it's been prohibited. So the endocannabinoid system will be taught in med school soon. I think it is a little bit now at University of Toronto. They give a 1-hour lecture or something, but eventually the doctors, and a lot of them are coming around. It's hard to blame them because they weren't taught that in med school. So they learn from their parents, yeah, some of them too. They learn from their patients, and you really cannot discount the voices of those with lived experience, really. You can't. You know, those of us that know what it's like to be suicidal, for instance. Many people that have post-trauma, like PTSD, a significant percentage die by suicide because they can't manage the nightmares and the flashbacks and the anxiety. And a lot become heavily addicted to opioid medications and go that way. Like I say, cannabis helps people become friendly with life. So you don't want to kill yourself, and you want to be able to engage and get out in the world again. And frankly, I think that it's a treatment option for every single human being. We had Dr. Michael Verbora at our York Region Cannabis Symposium last October. Sandy, you were there. And he was our keynote speaker. He works for sick kids as well as being a senior medical officer for a licensed producer. But his youngest patient is 6 months old, I believe. It could be 3 months old. And he's treated, thousands of patients in his medical career. Wow. He's a cannabinoid specialist. So that's a study of cannabinoid medicine. Youngest patient is 6 months old. Oldest patient, I think, is 104. So the range of people that it can help, it's medicine. And so, I think that the research is here. It's just that the scientists and the doctors, the medical community has been basically suppressed and misled for all these years. But now's the time to talk, and now's the time to talk to the real live people who it has actually helped.
And I love organizations too, like yours, that are listening, like you said, to what patients are saying. Patients in a lot of ways are educating not just their doctors, but the general public, their families, their friends, talking about it on the internet. A lot of the stories that are submitted through the Medicinal My Way website, even anonymously, the same thing rings true. Mm-hmm. A series of things were tried, and cannabis was sort of that last resort they wish they had earlier in their treatment. And a lot of factors that you've touched on, like not being able to talk about it, or the stigma associated, or the fear, made them wait longer than they needed to get treatment.
It's really heart-wrenching in some cases, really. And and so I've talked to hundreds of human resource professionals and property managers and lawyers and elders, and I'm going to be talking to various retirement homes, retirement facilities. And usually when I do my talk, I talk about the endocannabinoid system and how it could help with chronic pain. And by the way, mental health issues are associated. Mental health and chronic pain go hand in hand. If one is suffering all the time, one gets depressed and anxious. And doctors again tend to medicate with sleeping pills or tranquilizers. So back to Dr. Verbora, he was talking about how in the past three years or so, he hasn't had to prescribe any opioids. He's now choosing to prescribe cannabis as a frontline treatment before opioids. So that's huge.
That is
huge. And eventually, I think that's a very good sign.
I think so too. And he's one of the leading doctors sort of in the industry right now, and the most, he speaks very well about it, and I'm hoping more doctors follow suit.
Yeah, me too. And there are many of them, and there's so many patients around that have talked to me, but they don't necessarily want to come forward yet. And fine, I respect that. I understand that, because why would somebody want their staff to know, for instance, or their staff to see them in a medical cannabis clinic?
Is there any way, or is there a place where people can go and like see what medical industry professionals and get help in a kind of private way if they didn't want?
What I do is I refer people to doctors or nurse practitioners that can give an appointment via a secure telehealth network over their computer. So you can have an appointment with a doctor or a healthcare professional, nurse practitioner, in the comfort of your own office or in your own home. And sometimes elders are too frail and bedridden to have their appointments or to be taken to a medical clinic. So the caregiver or the designated power of attorney or person looking after the elder can actually have an appointment there on site. So things are getting better a little bit at a time, but there's just few. They're few. And frankly, we're here now geographically in North Toronto. The other side of Steeles actually is Toronto. We're here at the south end of York region. And unfortunately, I would say there's more dinosaurs up here in York region. To have an event, that's just a nice word that I use from time to time. I find that the comments by some people, public speakers, and just highly intelligent people, and sometimes the misinformation gets just horribly skewed, and it's just embarrassing, frankly, some of the comments. And have you heard anything in the news about York region, for instance, or
only what you had shared with me, but we see some of it in Hamilton as well. A lot of confusion about what's possible, but in the medical space versus the recreational or adult use markets,
right,
and which level of government is sort of in charge of what.
Right.
We've seen a lot of confusion there, and we're working as Medicinal My Way to educate as many as we can at all levels of government, not just the patient platform as well, to empower them with what they need to know to help their constituents, because I believe that that's the goal. You get into politics in a lot of ways to help the people that you live with and share your city with, so hopefully they're listening and watching this.
Right, and will be. Yeah.
Well, I know Markham and Richmond Hill right now have outlawed cannabis stores, retail stores. They're one of the forefront of trying to outlaw cannabis, but hopefully all the municipalities kind of follow each other and realize that this is medicine and that people are suffering and they need it.
That's right. And I was so disappointed to hear that, frankly, because it just creates another possibility for more of an unregulated market. And whether one takes it medicinally or recreationally, it's medicine, and your body doesn't know the difference. But what your body will know is if you get anything contaminated or from the unregulated market. There are some excellent dispensaries out there right now, and my wish would be if the government just sort of legalized all the existing businesses that have been operating for years, and they actually know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and they help patients, don't they? And do you know of any that, in Hamilton, for instance, that have been shut down, for instance?
Yes. Actually, earlier this week, they announced that all of the illegal pot shops in Hamilton have been shut down. We were sort of disappointed to see that, because we know that whether legal or not, they are an access point for patients who fall outside of access from the mail order or the
Right.
regulated system. We know that those without a home address, without the ability to make a minimum purchase, or whether they be homeless or in a shelter or in the hospital or
Yeah,
in
an
long-term
elder,
care, I think if they don't have a credit card, things like that, they're not able to use the mail order system to get their medication the way that I can, or the way that any of us can. So they were going to these locations, and they've been shut down, and that's something that Medicinal My Way is fighting for. We actually have filed with the city, against the city, the police, and the Attorney General for an injunction to allow a medically focused dispensary to stay open, to only serve medical patients.
That makes sense.
It was allowed in 2017. Judge Lofchek
Yeah.
put in an order that allowed one such location to stay open and operational to
Right.
serve only registered medical cannabis patients, and it was for a time, and then the new Cannabis Act came in,
Wow.
and the police used that to their advantage and followed that